moved their boundary right up to Terrace now.
So we'll add that to the agenda?
Yeah. Other Roy, the boundary review. Any other additions to the agenda? So I need a motion to approve the agenda as presented, moved by Oye. The seconder, seconded by Stuart. We'll do a round of introductions, and then we'll jump right into the Gitxsan Watershed Authority's presentation. My name is Guyer, one of the chiefs of the Firewood clan. I live in Brooktispiox. I'm also one of the negotiators for Gitxsan Chief's Office and chairperson for the Gitxsan Governance, Gigeenix.
Art Wilson, or Wolf, Anspaya.
Maybe more than Max.
Women Isaac, Irish Coast.
Stuart Mulha, George Samper, Jr.
Nish Kiminu, Robert Campbell, part of crisis management, fiscal crisis management.
Roy Wilson, Chief Luce. Afternoon, Oye, Ashmagat Oye, Gitxsan, displaced Indian, Smoker.
Margaret, RTJ, Keith Smoke.
Lam, May Martin, Whipstone.
Moss. Ochsel, Anspaya.
Clemaha, John Olson.
You can bench name is not I.
Go on, Sadie Harris, GWA.
Yeah, sorry, folks. Luke Gee I forgot I'm here now. I'm not the audience anymore. Molly Wagala, Gitxsan Club, GWA board.
Alicia Fernando, GWA Fish Biologist.
Marge Truman, Executive Assistant for Gitxsan Watershed Board.
Elaine Sampson, Nemesis for Gitxsan Governance.
Thank you very much, everyone, and
members.
Did I miss somebody? Oh, we have Catherine?
Yeah, Catherine Blackstone, Gale, and Fire.
Thank you. Then I'll hand the floor over to Alicia.
You get see the mana, who is and some on the presentation, GWA, you set on some second lot of mine down the sales hunt out in the sales. Even in 11 them limbs and level small in any knobs and my God is opening and closure. You know, though you have fisheries department long, then the service Lisa just had presentation. Your report of Sadie.
They did the presentation to the
Tommy. the Willington and Western Board last Thursday. Alicia. Thanks again, thanks for inviting us.
If this works. Again, my name is Alicia Fernando. I just want to say how thankful I am to be able to be in your beautiful territories. I've been here since 2007 and grew up in Wet'suwet'en territory. Yes, Charlie apologizes for not being here. So if there's any questions, I'll pass them on to him. But we can always take some information or any further information that you would like back and get back to you. Is there a button?
Can you see her?
So I work as part of a larger technical team, and we often speak together with the different First Nations fisheries offices to discuss the Skeena Sockeye information that either DFO puts out or that the different nations are working on. So I'm just going to briefly go through some of that information, some of the information I'm just passing on, and then just a quick update on some of the recent projects that we've been doing in the season this year. So I'll take a break in the middle there if anybody has questions. So during the fishing season, as most of you know from our updates that we pass on from DFO, they're using the Taiyi test fishery to produce an estimate of sockeye coming into the river daily. This is only an estimate. It's based on previous run timing and catchability, so there's a fair amount of uncertainty. It is still important that we have a way to assess whether the stocks are very low, if they're of conservation concern levels, if they're doing okay, or whether it looks like they're going to open a commercial fishery. So currently the estimate, there's about an 80% chance it's between 450,000 and 750,000. And so they'll often give a mean or a point estimate in the middle there. I'll just finish quickly just in case I do answer your question. So often we don't know how accurate that is until after the season. But now that it's later in the season, we have a number of sockeye that have come through the Babine counting fence that, as they enter Babine Lake. And it looks like the numbers that they estimated at Taiyi are following numbers that are coming into Babine Lake 3 weeks later. It takes them approximately 3 weeks to reach there. So it is helpful to know that it's tracking with that Taiyi estimate. We were expecting a low number of H4 sockeye this year and a lot of H5 fish, but it appears that the H5 fish didn't show up like we were expecting. And so that's from their parents from 2014 and 2015. So both of those brood years didn't do very well in producing returning adults. Did you have a specific question?
Oh, my question is, I fished on the coast for 38 years, and the escaping at the Taiyi was 400,000 and 500,000, and that was it. And then commercial fishing happens. I'm just wondering why it moved up to 700,000 when there is really lack of spawning beds up here now with logging going on. A lot of creeks dried up. Now I was wondering why they would want 700,000 sockeye to come up this way when there's no creeks to go to. They're all dried up from logging. I figured they would be trying to harvest that instead of letting it come up here and just swim in the rivers and die without spawning. A lot of the sockeyes are just swimming up river and spawning, and it's no good because there's big runoffs and it takes all those spawners, wash them down river. It just destroys it. You can see the river now, the last 2 days, it went way up again. And all the spawners along the river washed down. They die.
I'm not quite sure what you're asking, but each population upriver, we do know, we monitor how many are getting back to those spawning grounds. And for some species, more than others, they'll adapt and use a different area to spawn. But you're right, there is a lot of impacts in river and some freshwater conditions, especially last year, that may decrease that spawning production. And so that is even more of a case for having a buffer there to allow as many of them as possible to spawn, so that in 4 or 5 years you will have returns of each of the populations. But I hear what you're saying about the in-river conditions being a concern.
Bill?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was just wondering, is this how we're going to be working? Are we going to get allowed to ask questions during presentation, or shall we wait till after presentation?
I think it might be easier if I just quickly go through the first half and then I can open it up, if that's okay. And I'll try to go real quickly because I know you have a lot of important work to do afterwards. So this graph just shows Skeena sockeye total return to Canada, just to get a sense of the trends in recent years, the declines, and to note that we've also seen variability between stocks, so some doing better and some doing quite poorly. And this is just from 1970, so that's after the Babbion spawning channels were man-made in Babbion Lake. So you mentioned currently DFO has a target of at least 1.05 million before they open a commercial fishery, and at least 800,000 before they open a recreational fishery. So, as I mentioned, it's becoming more challenging to predict salmon returns because we have these environmental conditions, like you were saying, that make it, well, we just haven't seen them before, especially last year. And since 2014, we've been seeing quite warm ocean conditions off our coast as well. And so, in recent years and for the next couple, a lot of work is going to be done in reassessing just how many, what kind of numbers need to get to the spawning grounds for each population to be sustainable. Are these triggers that open fisheries okay? And trying to produce better tools for estimates. So this is just to show the large number of sockeye populations. In the Skeena, they're in red, and in the Nass watershed in purple. It's kind of hard to see, just the Gitxsan territory outline, it's in like a light green. And on the right, you can see it's the Skeena watershed and the different sockeye populations, and they're color-coded based on risk. And there's been some initial work, but we know there's some populations that aren't doing well, like Kitwanga, Swan Stevens, the Bear system, and in other areas, Maurice, and early and late Babine wild stocks. So all of these wild populations were healthy under traditional fishing practices. So the tools are there. We often talk about in the current state of fisheries that it's a mixed stock issue, which means that where the fishing is occurring, the wild fish are swimming together with larger numbers of enhanced fish. And so we can fish quite hard on those enhanced stocks, but the smaller wild stocks might not be able to handle that same pressure. And this issue increased, but also, increased the potential for increased fisheries when we opened the spawning channels in Fulton and Pinkett on Babine Lake. So you can kind of see on Babine Lake, at the mouth they have a fence that's a counting fence. That's never closed. And then the channels that look like this, there's one at Fulton and at Pinkett. And so they know the max amount of numbers that can go into those channels to make the max amount of fry. And so if they put any more in, it creates disease and will actually create less fry. So those opportunities, because they felt there was more capacity in the lake, do have trade-offs. So it in recent years has changed the proportion of the population. So you can see the natural, like before 1970, before those channels, the natural populations of Pinkett and Fulton is in this green. And and now with the enhanced channels are actually quite a majority of all the sockeye returning to the Skeena. This is the prior the Babine wild. This is what it looks like now. This is the non-Babine wild, so the rest of the stocks, including the ones I was talking about, and now the proportion in recent years. So we often get the question why we should care about having a diversity of stocks or care about the wild stocks. They're a lot smaller numbers. And I've heard a lot speaking with elders that there used to be a longer fishing season and certainly more reliable catches in river with more types of fish species and more populations within those species. you'll have a longer fishing season and more reliable catches. We talked about last time in the past the fishing season, being a number of months and relying on more populations and species, and more recently is quite condensed. We're also finding just naturally that the Skeena sockeye return, it's all of a sudden, it's not just trickling in and then trickling out, it's showing up and then dropping off. And so it's very much in the middle of that fishing season that everybody is trying to get out there. So another thing that we're seeing is changes in productivity. Some just it being up and down and all over the place for different populations. So typically Pacific salmon, for every spawning pair, they'll result in 4 returning fish. And more recently, we've seen a spawning pair only produce 1 fish. So we expected more fish to come back this year. And it's important to note that all species of salmon returning in 2019 experienced above average temperatures at every stage of their life cycle. And so we did actually see lower than expected returns for a majority of the species. You can kind of see each stage of spawners that came back this year to spawn had temperature pressures in those years, both in the ocean and in freshwater, especially last year. So we talked a little bit about the logging and different impacts in river. Those more extreme freshwater conditions like we've been seeing lately, it can certainly increase those impacts from different things that occur in river. We have a technical program including monitors that look at the FSC fishery, the food fishery, and we calculate a total catch estimate of 7 communities for stock assessment purposes only. Just a preliminary update for Gitxsan catch this season is approximately just over 22,000 sockeye and just over 4,000 chinook. In years of abundance, the Gitxsan typically harvests between 50 and 70,000 sockeye in the food fishery, and that's been quite consistent. I can just quickly go over some of the programs that help us with our assessments. Most of the fisheries offices have a number of stock assessment programs, so we're gearing up for spawning ground counts. Fences, they'll give full counts, so it won't be quite such a guess or estimate. We have a fence at Slamgish Lake where we count adults and we count the smolts leaving the lake as well. So, and other fences like Lake Babine Nation runs and Kitwanga fence by Gitxsan fisheries. And I mentioned the juvenile assessments. They also have different programs that assess how many fry are in a lake, and so looking at each life stage, they can kind of tell the difference of survival between freshwater issues and marine issues. so that's helpful. And certainly all of this is used in discussions around fish and fish habitat concerns. We often have tissue sampling projects to get fish genetic information. This has many uses by scientists to improve information on many of the stocks that we talked about. It has evolved quite a bit even recently, and development tools are often being led by First Nations, including a lot of the stock assessment, counting and whatnot. We used to do a lot of baseline monitoring. It certainly can help with developing mapping and research tools to support protections that you may want on your Laxia. We currently have quite an extensive water flow and temperature monitoring on several systems. This is important, especially with the recent changes in our environment that we've been seeing. We are also putting a weather station in the Upper Skeena. It's kind of a partnership with a university, and hope to have a live link on our Facebook page. So stay tuned. These pictures here, this is just a PVC pipe. I know it doesn't look like anything, but there's a small, really small temperature logger inside of it. And so if you do see any, we're trying to keep them in the water, and we'll download the information every year, and basically we'll have the temperature every hour. This is really important to look at patterns that the fish require, and to protect certain areas that either protect them or look at areas that maybe need to be changed in order to protect them. On the right, you can see Tim has one of our, it's basically a machine that looks like almost like a fish finder that uses sonar, and it measures the profile of the creek, and it uses some software to help us measure how much flow is coming out of each of the creeks. And so we look at that throughout the season and how that changes year to year. And these tools can also help with restoration projects. This is the last slide. This is a recent example from McCully Creek. The fish couldn't get up the stream in years like last year. And we had often taken genetic samples for chum, certainly coho use it, and they weren't able to. And so we're slowly trying to figure out what might work, and using safe techniques that are gradual. You can see here we've planted a bunch of willow berms in hopes that it'll actually get the creek to go into one channel. At this point, it's very spread out, and it's kind of some of it's natural and some of it's from agricultural impacts. So there's lots of that type of work to be done as well. And that's most of the current projects right now, other than lots of research proposals. But if anybody has any particular questions, if they're too hard, I'll pass them to Charlie.
Thank you, Alicia. So we're entertaining questions. I see Bill and then George.
Okay. This is just for comparison. You earlier in the slide there, you were showing that the well, I'm assuming that those numbers are for 2019. The brute, the adult are 5-year-old to 4-year-old.
Yes.
Is that the data for this year?
Yes.
Okay,
Well,
so,
which one? The first one there, it was we don't have that data back yet. That was just what we were expecting based on their siblings from previous years.
you say there's no show for 2014 brood year.
I mean, the expected,
Yeah.
yeah.
And you had no show for 2014, so I was just wondering what the data was for 2018. Was there a lot of brood year for 2014 in last year, or?
So there was a lot of H4s, and so that's why we were expecting a lot of their siblings, the H5 sockeye, to show up this year. Like I say, we won't know until postseason what the ages are and even what the genetics are. But based on the numbers, something happened for sure.
So it's normally H5 that we get.
So most recently, typically it's like a 40%, 60% split between H4 and 5. But most recently, we've been kind of running on one cylinder, as Charlie says. So we either we'll get a lot of H4s and a few H5s, or it'll switch the next year. And so in years like this year, where maybe both of them didn't do well, and in 2013, it's we really noticed.
Okay, that's the only reason why I asked this. I wanted to see what the comparison was. It's just for comparison purposes. I'm just wondering whether it's the trait that it's starting that we should be worried about and need to look at further.
Yeah, it is concerning. I guess the no-show is kind of more that we didn't see the numbers that we were expecting, especially given that lots of H4s came back last year. We're expecting a lot of H5s this year. But I can keep you posted on the postseason information if that's of interest.
George? Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You sound like you have a lot of information. I'm just wondering if you're aware that as a commercial fisherman of over 40 years, I was aware that there's floating canneries out on the Pacific Ocean from different nations. One of them is the Chinese, and they know exactly when the fish are going to come back towards the Skeena, Nash Skeena, and the Fraser. And some years they hit it right, and they can up all our fish before they even come around to the Alaska area. Now, when is that going to be challenged by the different other nations that really depend on that fish, and rather not allow these other nations that are across the Pacific to, harvest them before they even come close to where they came from? And another question I want to ask is, you mentioned change with certain things. My question is how? Right now, we try to stop things from what the government is allowing to happen in our territories. These people are just coming in and they're clear-cutting all our trees, which stops the flow of rain from going down so fast, flooding roads, wrecking roads, and wrecking rivers. There's a big concern that I hope you can include in your data. And I would like to see change happening on that as well. And not only that, the forestry. There's people digging up and testing for coal, gold, copper, and everything, almost all over the place. I've seen some creeks with black bottoms because of testing that they're doing, drilling. Wastewater, or the water they use to cool their drills, comes down these creeks, and there's none but blackness on the creek bottoms. So I want to see that change. Thank you.
Yeah, certainly need for more monitoring and accountability, and need for input into those environmental assessments. But I can get a proper answer on your first question together and submit it to the group.
Roy?
I just touched upon a little bit of what I said earlier, and just regarding, I see your scale of return of sockeye, and you said the water was too low last year for fish to come back. When I was fishing, the old timers used to fish, and they say if the water is too warm up the rivers, they said the fish is just like the scientists. They said they send a group of fish to different up river. They go up so far, check it out. And if the river is too warm, they said these fish go back, meet with the ones that are coming, tell them they can't go up. This is science of our part. That's why fish don't come back into the river when it's too warm, because it's too warm for them to go up on hats, because it's just a waste. And another thing too is we have our fancy hatchery sitting in Trispiaps. When you're talking about fish, why isn't it used? Why isn't the government using that hatchery when there's other hatcheries along the BC are used? Ours is not being used. And just like George said about this mine drilling, they use a lot of water. They were drilling up in our part of our territory about 3-4 years ago, and they pumped a lot of water to cool off those drills, and they run right into our creeks. And I don't think you'd want to swim in there too if you see that what it looks like. Same thing with road building. You know, the more you go into our territory, the more you build roads. It distracts the water system, the underwater system that runs. It diverts it off so it doesn't go into the creeks. And you drive along Highway 16, you would see these lakes before. They're all drying up. Right along BC, along Highway 16, where the roads have been built and rebuilt again, they divert those underbed water system. That a lot to do with how fish are. And I see on thing here that I missed a while ago regarding, again, I'll mention it, the test net. They start middle of June, 3rd week in June, before they start. How many sockeye go up before these test nets go in? Probably 200, 300, 400,000, easily. Because I used to go down the coast in May, go spring fishing. And I used to catch 6 or 8 sockeye. Like I say, these are the ones that come up early, big sockeye. With my spring net, and it's 6 1/4, 7 1/4, 8 1/4. I catch sockeye. So I'm just wondering when they're gonna change doing their test net in June to maybe end of May. It'll say a lot of difference in how much fish is going up already. And this kind of weather again, our old people used to say, fish swim low. They go low. They don't fish, they don't swim on top. You don't see them. They're way down low. I used to remember them when we couldn't catch fish. He used to tell me, put on your 50 mass. He said, you'll catch your fish. Throw your 30 mass away, it's no good. Fish are not swimming in the shallows, they're going deep. So that's what I do, and then I catch this big sockeye. Caught it.
Thank you, Zeus.
Just to assure that we're writing down everybody's feedback and comments. I guess only one related comment, because you covered a lot. We did discuss in the other group a bit about enhancement and hatcheries, and certainly there is a variety of opinions, but there is a broad scientific consensus that there really are a last resort. There's other reasons why you might want to do them, but as far as recovery of, say, wild stocks, or stocks in general, they often use those techniques for a short period of time to get them back up and running. And I guess to note that we have no water supply at the hatchery anymore.
Thank you, Alicia. Larry?
Just a couple of questions. The babbing enhancement channels, when was that put in? Maybe explain to me how that helps the salmon spawn, and I know what enhancement means, but you have the channels, you have that picture there, and how does that, has that been built recently?
So this was in the 60s and 70s when they built them. They felt that there was more capacity in the lake to produce more fish, to produce more fishing.
Has it helped at all?
Yes, there's different views. It has, like say, that Pinkett and Fulton enhanced stock has increased and become a large proportion of the schooner run. But it's also impacted a lot of the other populations. So may have produced more commercial fishing, but it's hard to answer whether it actually
So you're not monitoring
whether it actually helped in river, whether the benefits really came back to people in river. So the spawning channels themselves, they're man-made in such a way that they have perfect gravel size, and so they can optimize the number of fry that they can produce in a small area. But like I say, it is a little bit like putting all your eggs in one basket, and it has had some impacts on other populations. It's a complex thing.
Yeah, well, if there is a significant increase in fry and why, if there's an increase in the spawning and they produce a lot of fry and they end up coming down river, so why close the fence if you've increased the salmon on the babbing?
So the babbing fence itself, that's not closed, that's just for counting and for First Nation fishing.
We hear that fence being closed.
Yeah, so that's why I was trying to clarify that fence is not closed. It's basically the openings to those two channels. Once they have the max amount of fish in them, those are what has closed, and so often there'll be a surplus fishery on those enhanced stocks in Babbitt Lake.
Okay. Then on slam geese, the count is significantly low. Talked to my brothers about that. Is that the return from the Skeena or the Nass or both?
Yeah, it's right on the divide there, right? But
It is, it's
yeah.
right on the,
And I
on
have
the
heard
plateau
stories
there.
of how the water flow has actually switched between watersheds, which is interesting. They do return up the Skeena. Right now, I think they have 41 sockeye, and that's only about, I just calculated it, about 20% of what they would normally get to this date. So it's kind of tracking about what we got in 2013.
yeah, and I did some research on our plateau. And steelhead that comes up the Nass and the steelhead that comes up from the Skeena, sometimes they can go either way, and the document I read, they're genetically the same.
Yeah, I read that too. Yeah,
Because
it's
of that
fascinating. We haven't had much for steelhead studies up there. We would love to, but.
Interesting.
Yeah, the Slangish itself has quite a good steelhead population.
Yep.
Robert?
Thank you, Chair. Got a few questions for Lisa here. Since the most met by being late fish fence, quite a few people announced that the fence are being closed sometimes. And so far we haven't got no scientific data the fence actually help. Why do they allow seining there after all this time the fish fighting their way up the river and then they get saved by the lake? And there's no such thing as too much fish. No such thing. Who counted the fish 50 years, 100 years, 150 years ago? There's no fence. Fish find their own spawning grounds. Doesn't matter where you go, that's where they spawn, that's where they return. And when you seine up Babine, doesn't that deplete how much is coming out the following years? After all this time fighting the way up the river? And not only that, seining wrecks spawning grounds. We all know that. I didn't fish as long as these guys, but I used to go with my uncle till I was about 18 years old. That started when I was 12 years old, going to my uncle's down to Canada. And they know when the species are coming up. And fish are just abundant. And then when they allowed the seining at the mouth of the Skeena, I knew we were in trouble. And it's still happening. And we got no explanation for that from either BC or feds. And we need an answer for that. Because we're fighting for our fish coming up the Skeena, and not only the Skeena, but the Nass. And somebody brought up the Gitxsan hatchery. I brought that up a few times. Why did they close it? And when it was open, they limit how much fry they're going to hatch. Why limit? See, the Gitxsan hatchery is the first one to close when they said they're short of funding. And I find that strange. That's bias. Just to give you an example, I know people don't like it when they go sideways, but that's what happened to our sawmill. Our sawmill was first to close, because Smithers and Terrace were still going, but they're the same company. And I think that regards the same way with the fishery hatchery. Kispiock's hatchery is the first to close and the others are still going. There's some bias happening here, and it shouldn't happen. And I often wonder, do the federal and provincial government really care about preserving our fish? They keep selling licenses and issuing permits for sport fishing, irregardless how much fish is coming up. Like you see what they done when they opened the sport fishing, the lower side of Gitxsan. That affects the whole skeena. Gitxsan is part of the skeena right down to the coast. When they said they're going to close it, that means the whole Aliax, the skeena. And nobody was able to answer that. It's the big bucks you guys are always looking at. Money talks. And they cater to the rich. Yet we're fighting for our fish. We're in a dire crisis here. I've never seen the river so low all my life. I'm 76 years old. And I go up and down the skeena, even up to the Babine, the mouth of Babine. There's lots of steelhead there, but that's different species. Steelhead all year round fish. And we also question who monitors the sports fishermen. That's never been answered. How do we know they're following the rules? They might have kept 1, 2, 3 extra. Does anybody know? I doubt it. And when you sports fish, that's against our Ayok Gitxsan. That's playing with fish. And that's taboo in our Ayok. And when you catch and release, how many times catch and release and then the fish still survives? We've got no data on that. All these little things you guys think it's simple. It all adds up to our crisis right now. You guys think it might be just, oh, that's nothing. But when you think about it, it adds up, it builds up. Little by little, but it's there. And somebody also mentioned Alaska, Chinese, Japanese fishermen. We've been hearing about Alaskan fishermen catching fish that is bound to Canadian waters. I don't know what's happening there, whether the government's asking questions about it or they're trying to make a deal. Most of those fish doesn't reach where they're going to spawn. Because the Americans, I heard some even from south go to Alaska to catch all that fish. See, all those little things they add up. It's not little how many fishing boats up there. So they're catching thousands, maybe even millions of fish before they reach the Canadian shores and waters. Those things we keep asking and nobody bothers to answer. All the government scientific numbers sometimes don't add up. How can people wait out there, or even Ottawa, know what's happening up there. All they look at the numbers. Oh, it's okay, look at how many sockeye coming. Chinook. When I was growing up, the fish used to be like that. The confluence of the bulk and skin. It's so thick, it's just silver. Like there's nothing there. You don't even see bears on the riverside because there's nothing to eat. You should see them every year. So all those little things, you guys think it's nothing. It adds up, adds up, adds up. And there's your prices. Everybody knows about the logging, the chemical CN used to spray the right away. Even the silviculture in the bush, they use chemicals to spray some of the trees. It all sinks into the ground. We need answers. We can have meetings every day and show us those slides. That doesn't always answer our questions. We need the head honchos to come up here and explain to us, which they won't do. Thank you.
Thank you. We took down a lot of information, and we do agree it's very complex and, like you say, death by a million cuts. So we would love if we could get in the same room like this with DFO so they can answer directly. We can provide some information on the questions that you asked, but perhaps I can go from our notes and write them out for you, and at the same time still request that they answer for themselves.
Thank you, Richard. Oui.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Boy, you're brave to come here, but we appreciate it. You've heard all the chiefs in front of me. Every one of them hit it right on the nail of what we've seen way before then. This happened way before. 3 years now, I haven't taken one salmon out of the skeena in hopes that it'll come back. But it isn't. I've been getting my salmon from our neighbor in the Nash watershed the last 3 years. But it's our culture we share. I've been involved the last 3 years with environmental assessment. Revitalization last year, which came into a royal assent in November 2018. And one of the things, and one of the issues that we really stress, and we want you to do the same at this table, is you have to include salmon compensation as part of the environmental. None of the governments want to take responsibility of what happened, like you heard the chief say, forestry, mining, road building. And it was just recent now that we indentured that fish compensation has to be part of any project proposal. Every one of them, mining, road building, forestry, even the salmon department, DFO. They don't want to take the responsibility, yet it is so critical for our people, especially on the restoration. In 1985 and early 80s, while I was on council at Gitxsan, two of the hereditary chiefs there that passed took me up to the spawning grounds of where they say it was just thrived of salmon. It was the late Wagala uncle, Rod's uncle, David Milton. They said, we want you guys to try to do a restoration here. This was once full of salmon. There's nothing there now because of the old mine site that was closed. We did an application on that, and the DFO said, we got your application. We'll keep it on file. Again, we are asking, you know, the hereditary chiefs are asking again at this table that this be implemented ASAP as one of our assistants to do it. We can do it. We cannot ask the FO to do it. We can do it at this table. We know where they are. We don't need scientific studies. We live it. We're embedded in our grassroots here. We can take you to the areas that would be really good for do fish compensation, especially the one in Gitxsan. You know, but we can do more. We have to clean up the area that is damaged. The government so richly took billions and billions and billions of dollars every year, and they can't be found accountable to this compensation. So that is what I really recommend you bring forward back. That this has to be indentured on any future project. Even a 10 feet of road, you have to have money in there. The governments don't want to put a cent on it. But we are not allowing any, at least in my territory, I'm not allowing any development unless this is actually indentured. But it's just me and my territory. Other chiefs are doing follow the same thing. But that's what a big concern we have. And all the rest, I'm one of the commercial fishermen down there. We usually have a return every 4 years in these little towns. And our elders usually tell us we're going to get a lot of fish this year or no, depending on the weather, the winter, how much snow we got. They predict that. We've done it for hundreds of years. You know, we didn't need a biologist to do that for us. We can tell you how many fish are going to go up Tahiti before they even go there. But then that's me. Again, I'd like to really people to bring that fish compensation has to be a must on any future proposals. You have to put that in there very strongly for us. And I noticed your map, Skeena Water said, it's not the same as our map, but it's another different map altogether. We don't want the government's getting a hold of that or they'll cut down our territory size. Because our action means the whole Mackenzie River, Amanika, the whole area that Gitxsan owns. Right over where the Skeena started, in the Sustad area. That's our tributary and the other creeks that go in there. So it's larger than what your map is. Use our map. We give you that. We'll give you that authority as the Skeena Waters. Because that's our enact, our fish, our territory. Kabir, and good luck going back to the government. You're hired.
Thank you. I take that all in.
Thank you, Lucas Hillis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have 4 questions for you, and first I'll introduce Gitxsan. We have about 619 members. We have about 14 fishing sites, and we have about 3 smokehouses that work. We've governed this, our NAT for many years. We're not commercial fishermen here. We're Samogan. And we have a responsibility over the NAT. So my first question would be, you don't have to answer it, is I wonder how you feel if you feel you're in a conflict of interest when you work for GWA and funded by the Department of Fisheries, and then you come and meet with the hereditary chiefs who are basically the government of the territory that you work on. So the question is, do you feel like you're in a conflict of interest? You don't have to answer that now, you can leave that for Charlie if you want. The second question is, in the media, there was a joint request by the Gitxsan, Wet'suwet'en, and Lake Babine to the Department of Fisheries to close the fisheries in the area, which led me to believe that your group, GWA, does not listen to the news. Last year, this table and the Gitz table closed the fishery to recreational fish, and again closed it the inactive recreational fish, and then we hear on the news that the Gitxsan are asking the Department of Fisheries, moving the Gitxsan into a subordinate position rather than a government, and asking the Department of Fisheries to close the fishery. So we're wondering if that makes you feel like you're in a further conflict of interest, as your interests seem to oppose that of the hereditary chiefs. And the third question I'm going to ask is, who did you consult with before you made that media release? Did you consult with any of the hereditary chiefs? Because I do not recall meeting with GWA regarding GWA requesting the Department of Fisheries to close the fisheries before they did their media release. So I'm wondering who you consulted with. If you can answer that now, or Charlie can answer it. And within the past few days, few weeks, the Department of Fisheries closed the native fishery. And we're wondering when your agency went out with the notices that the food, social, and ceremonial fisheries were closed. Did you, who in your group agreed to that? Agreed to give out the message to the Gitxsan people that we had to stop our fishery. So we're wondering who agreed to that within. Was it a board agreement? Was that a staff agreement? Or was that just direction coming from DFO? Because I don't believe that you can agree to any closures as an agent, a technical agency. But that's just my opinion. Thank you.
So we have 4 questions. A lot of them are above my level, and I'll ask Charlie to answer.
May I say something?
And anybody at the board too. But I do have a couple comments. Just that I was asked by the board to speak today and the last time. The last question, I wouldn't say it's agreement. A lot of it is simply passing on information and just providing any information that we have. So, but for official answers, I'll leave that to Charlie.
No, I want to thank Gord for his comments there, but he's stating some very serious, I don't know what I should call it, but I think it should be in writing. And I think you have to give us a proper time to answer it.
Thank you. Any other questions?
I have one question. I'm sitting there listening to all this that's going on, and they're talking about the Babine. How much caviar did Jimmy Patterson get out of there this year? I hope so. I hope it's 0. because I forget what award he was just getting. Their government was patting him on the back again just the other day on TV. But I'm interested in the fact to see, because of our saying the Skeena is closed, I would like to know as soon as possible what the results are of what the return is going to be like in the whole Skeena for us. I'm worried about the level of the rivers. If they don't get up to spawn, to the spawning grounds, that's going to really affect us. And I see there's a steady decline. So we really have to roll around and think about what can we do? What can we do as a governor, third level of governance here, to somehow try to increase that? That's the direction the governance, they say we have to be our third level of government. As chiefs are on this table, we're going to have to really look at what we're going to do to stop the recreational fishing, stop the selling of the sockeye from our own people that are doing it. And I think most of them are abiding by the closure, but I was surprised to hear Gordy say that. I assumed that it was our own people that asked for the closure. I don't know. I was just surprised to hear that. So it's a good question. I think somebody has to answer it. But we have to, as a governing body, really sit down and rack our brain. What direction can we take, or what stance can we take against the government to make them understand? Because it's not just the fishing, it's just about everything we do on our Lafitte. They just bypass us. And they've been hounding and knocking on Cleomah's door, and I've been telling them to let up. I've got more personal things I'm dealing with right now, and I don't want to do any business. And they still haven't stopped. And I've just told them to stay off Cleomah's or Lafitte until we can make a decision. And they don't seem to listen. So we've got a lot of governance to look at and how we can deal with this. But I enjoyed the presentation to see what's happening. The writing's on the wall. We have to look at it now, because if we're not getting the returns, that's our livelihood, is our fish. That's what keeps us going as Native people. Without it, we're nothing. Thank you.
One more question.
Okay.
One quick question.
Because that'll take my time. Okay, this question I think is something that I wouldn't mind seeing, like they suggested, something written down. I'd like to know how many different companies have a seine boat up in the Babine, and who allowed it. Because we know that wherever there's a seine boat, it wrecks, you know, the channels for fish to be safe in. And it also wrecks the channels for those little fish that are heading down to the sea. They hide amongst that grass, and if there's no grass, they get eaten up before they can even leave Babine. I understand our neighbors to the Babine are saying Gitxsan got nothing to do with what we do in this lake, but without our concern, that fishing is gonna die out and there will be no more of their own fishing. There will come a time, like right now, you've heard our concern about trying to keep the rivers clean. So, we wanna know, could you write down the names of the companies that have, sailboats up there? I heard something that sort of bothered me, that's why I wanted to hear it. And I wanted to be able to see those different titles of people that own sailboats up there. Thank you.
Yeah, I do want to make sure I get that correct. I guess a important note that we talked about at the last meeting was, the seining that happens on the enhanced Pickett and Fulton sockeye in Babine Lake is done by Talc Fisheries run by Lake Babine Nation. None of the other nations have the same boat in there. And I'll make sure we get a more complete answer to you in writing.
Don't leave anybody out.
Yes, for sure.
Just a comment?
Larry?
Just a comment. I like the presentation. We need statistics. We need this kind of information for us to make decisions. I'd like to thank you for that. Thank you guys for that. Just a comment.
Thank you very much for having me. It's very complex and very important, so thank you.
Thank you, Alicia and the GWA team for coming to the meeting and doing a presentation to the Gitxsan. I was very appreciative of the information you have shared. The slide presentation is very complete. And of course, we will always have questions, and I certainly appreciate the time that you put in to make this presentation. Thank you very much.
Again, Simon Dawson, when some moment, so was Mamma Yokshiton, said gig, Sevelan one nation. We're fighting the same battle. When we first heard there was going to be hardly any fish coming back, we fought like hell that all the commercials be shut down, even including the spring fishing trolling that was going on in the Haida-Gwaii, on the outside of Haida-Gwaii. We asked them to stop that fishery, and any commercial fishery that was going to be taking place, we asked that to be stopped. And then the next one that we asked to stop was the sporties. We asked that all sporties be off the Skinner River. We didn't want no fishing by the sporties. We did that fight. And we told them the last people to take their nets out of the water would be the food and ceremonial use is the last to leave the Skeena. If the crisis is really bad, then we'd have to do it, and we will do it. So our fight is the same as you guys' fight. We just have to work together. You know, our little group is fighting like hell for people that are coming behind us to have the same amount of fish that we're having today. They gotta eat too. They're not born yet, but that's our biggest fight, is for them to have fish too. And I hope we and continue to get help from you guys, the Simgiget of the Gitxsan Nation. We said the same thing to the Simgiget. We asked them to help us in this fight. The biggest thing that the fisheries allowed was the sporties to continue after everything was closed. was just for steelhead and trout. They weren't supposed to touch any other fish. And we couldn't get them to stop that. But we need help from you guys to completely shut it down when there is a shutdown. GWA tried like hell by itself, but we didn't get away with having the steelhead and the trout fishery stopped by the sporting. And I'd like to thank you guys again and hope we continue to work together. We will do the same with the Gitxsan, and hope the good Lord puts his hand on all of us that we will get ahead someday, not fight. We need to work together as one. Thank you. God bless.
Oh, yeah. Thank you very much. We will take a 5-minute break here.
Do we turn this off? None of this. Yeah, this didn't work anyway. No, just this one was working. Yeah. Technical difficulties.
Yeah.
Can I borrow that?
Okay.
Can I borrow that?
Which one?
The whole thing?
Oh, when?
No, I want to record one of our elders.
Oh, yeah.
For one name that we're trying to get back.
Oh, well, this
How does
is-
that work?
This is my equipment here, but you have to talk to Linda or somebody
Oh, yeah.
for this piece. This is the one that broadcasts to Facebook, and then all the cameras filming goes through this.
Oh, smokes.
Yeah.
Pretty fancy guys. What's this, your phone?
Yeah, this is my phone. I just downloaded the app to put on to here, and then this is called DJI Osmo.
Mm-hmm.
And it makes sure that your video is nice and smooth.
Wow.
So that it's, you know, my hand is all shaky. So now it's smooth.
Oh, yeah. Right on.
Yeah.
Started off with 2 and the last speech did 8. Might be stepping on your sister.
I don't know how many Simon have. One right underneath the bridge is really good because it's hard to shut.
I think if I cut their Benson was from Peaceville today, go spawn, and it's over spawn. You go back down again to other rivers. Sometimes you go all the way back out. Yeah. Cut to Benson, it's too over spawn. All the way back up. They come back as 6 to 10 years old.
Hang up.
Jump on some green.
Leave your noise, I think.
No, I'm still here.
Okay.
No Mexicans.
Did you get to hear everything?
What nationality is?
Who? No Mexican. So he's connected to
Getting my stuff.
It's his own territory.
He's connected to who?
Norwegian.
Better when you have the mic, huh?
So Iceland. Norway claimed Iceland.
Mm-hmm.
You see on the news a couple of months ago about this young fox in New Brunswick.
So,
Oh, yeah, craft. Made his way back.
Yeah,
You know, geez. It was only 6 weeks, 6 weeks, 6 months old. Made it all the way back.
Good time.
And it's all that.
bingo players.
There you go.
Bingo
Yeah. From house. Taking it to bingo party?
No, some travel all the way to Vancouver, Bridgestone, Edmonton.
States.
Yeah.
so we'll call a meeting back to order.
That's where they live in. Seeing what bingo.
Thank you for all the questions, comments. We have the minutes. Roger, but if it gets too close to your, then you'll just have to leave. Okay, we have the minutes, on the agenda. Everyone had a chance to review the minutes?
That's nice.
My name's not on there. Absent. I misunderstood. I thought it was Arthur. Robert Campbell, a special team. 17th?
What's that Chinese name?
Your name's not on there?
No, I wasn't here. I was absent. I thought it was just for those guys again.
Regular meeting.
That's when you dealt with me. You could then.
You got it correct, man.
Is there a chance I might be able to see the response to it?
Yep, I can get to it. So the one error on that, point wasn't on the absent list, so I had her name on there. Any other corrections?
Which list?
The minutes, the July 17th minutes, in the absent list there.
Cliff
Yes.
Sampere too.
Who?
Cliff Sampere.
Cliff Sampere?
He's on there.
Is he on there?
Yeah, he's on there.
Oh, yeah.
Extra quick now, man.
Yeah.
That's right, fight.
So where was Sadie? She was absent?
She just got on the phone
Yeah.
and was really happy.
I understood it to be just was Art and Bob Campbell, special team, I thought they said.
Any other changes? If none, ask for a mover to make a motion to adopt the minutes.
No, so moved.
Moved by Tim Maha, seconder to the motion. Second by Ramokos. Question on motion?
Question?
Question's been called. All those in favor? Against? Abstentions? Thank you.
Brian, I didn't get all the pictures of the minutes, so I'll just abstain.
One abstention.
Kathy is not on there too.
There's two pages. Catherine?
I just got the one page.
Okay. Any business arising from the minutes? Gordon provided a letter for the request on the motion, and I also followed up with a response to the 9 questions and a request to make it in to have a meeting. I have had no response to date. Any other business from the minutes? None? We will move on. Thank you. Two appointments to the Standing Committee on Gitxsan jurisdiction. Purpose of this committee is to develop terms of reference for the Standing Committee. Gordon?
Mr. Chair, could I add on to that the oath? I might as well do the oath at the same time.
Sure, yes. I also want to welcome the new members to the Gitxsan governance. Not new members, but I don't know how to call it. It's,
Welcome the addition.
welcome the addition, yes. Thank you. So we have Wimanosik, we have Wasmaha, and Hatijay. So Gordon is doing the,
And Gordon.
And Gordon.
and Gordon himself.
I don't know, we should let him in.
You're
We already passed the motion.
You're a bad man, John.
So don't sign your oath yet until you read it to him.
Yep, we'll do Peggy's first.
Okay.
Okay, Peggy, can you stand up and do your oath to the truth here? Just read that out and then we'll sign it after.
Oh, okay. I'm just.
Hold me up, Henry.
Hold you up a little bit.
Do I have to read my name?
Peggy Morgan from.
Oh, Peggy Morgan from Apostolha, do solemnly swear that I will truly serve, be faithful, and bear true, how do you say that?
Allegiance.
Allegiance to all Gitxsan chiefs as we govern according to the yoke.
Yeah.
Yeah, without favor, affection, malice, or ill will, and that I will, to the best of my power, cause policies, practices, and confidentiality of Gitxsan government to be kept and preserved, and further, I will do the best of my judgment, perform all the duties of my office, and conduct myself in accordance with Gitxsan values of trust, honor, respect, caring, humility, sharing, and humor. Yeah.
You swear, you sign that.
Don't pull my chair.
Okay.
Okay.
Hey, yeah. Ron Claudio, I, Larry Sculls from the Women Ask, do solemnly swear that I will truly serve, be faithful, and bear true allegiance to Gitxsan chiefs as we govern according to Ayok without favor, affection, malice, or ill will, and that I will, to the best of my power, cause policies, practices, confidentiality of the Gitxsan government to be kept and preserved. And further, I will, to the best of my judgment, perform all the duties of my office and conduct myself in accordance with the Gitxsan values of trust, humor, respect, caring, humility, sharing, and humor. Dem Luyum Ayok Stupne.
You sign that. I'll fill that up. Thank you. Where's the other one?
You swear did. Keith Moe from Wolf RTJ. Do solemnly swear that I will truly serve, be faithful, and bear true allegiance to the Gitxsan chiefs as we govern according to their yoke, yet without favor, affection, malice, and that I will, to the best of the power, cause politics, practice, and confidentiality of Gitxsan governments to be kept and preserved. Further, I will, to the best of my judgment, perform all the duties of my office and conduct myself in accordance with the Gitxsan values of trust, honor, respect, caring, humanity, sharing, and humanity. Yes. Ayok.
Okay, yeah, I got it. Do my oath here.
In front of you.
I promise. I, Gordon Sebastian from Wilflute and Jewis, do solemnly swear that I will truly serve, be faithful, and bear true allegiance to all Gitxsan chiefs, as we govern according to Ayuksni, without favor, affection, malice, or ill will, and that I will, to the best of my power, cause policies, practices, and confidentiality of Gitxsan governance to be kept and preserved. And further, I will, to the best of my judgment, perform all the duties of my office and conduct myself in accordance with Gitxsan values of trust, honor, respect, caring, humility, sharing, and humor.
So help my God. So help my God.
So help me God.
You forgot to really yell shit.
Thanks, you guys.
Thank you, everyone.
Sign it ready? That's my pen. Yeah. You should see.
No. All right, so I'll finish this later, I'll do this. We want to do, we need to appoint two to this committee. Gee, I forgot my presentation to the Gates group. Anyway, so you're, you guys are the Gitxsan government. And you're not subordinate to anyone. You are the government. When you decide what to do with your river, that's your decision. You're not asking BC to help you close the river, and you're not asking Canada to help you close the river. That is your responsibility. Beach Samoga. So as the government now, we got about 41 head chiefs involved, and we have 10 reserve seats here now that for people if they decide to join us in the next few months, next few years, the seat will always be there. And what you've done is you have a crisis management team, and on that you have Brian, Bobby, and Art. And then the Gets have Vernon, Robin Alexander, and Norman Moore. So these guys are dealing with the crisis on the river, and it's a big job. And it's gonna pick up. Now we're looking at a standing committee. It's basically to look at jurisdiction and also intergovernment. So who's on that committee from the Gets? Is Dale Good? And Lawrence Watson. So we need 2 from here. If you pick 3, then we're going to have an election. If you pick 5, we're going to have an election. But if you claim 2, then we don't need an election. So the standing committee will deal with intergovernment relations, and one would be signs for an act. We've met with the government already. and they told us that that they're interested in paying for signs. So when we look at that, and if we get a budget set out and where we're gonna put the signs, then it'll be up to each of you to decide whether or not you want the signs on your ad. You're the boss, and the government's willing to help on that part. And the other thing you'll be looking at is you meet with the ministers. You'll meet with Doug Donaldson. You'll meet with Scott Fraser, I think his name is, the Minister of Fisheries. Who's that?
Andrew Wilkinson?
Oh, yeah. Okay? And in the future, I see 2 more committees. But we're doing this in step by step, eh? So tonight, can we have, who would be interested, or you could nominate who would be on the committee? We need 2.
You will volunteer?
You could volunteer or nominate.
Volunteer.
Roy, volunteer? Any nominations? Anybody else volunteering?
Does Brian work with this group?
Yeah, he's a chair. He's a chair of the government, so he's automatically with all the committees.
You nominate Larry Scott?
Gord, what's the length of the that they're on the committee?
It's a standing committee, so you'll be on there for a long time. Okay, the crisis management team, they'll come to an end eventually.
Yeah.
So the standing committee, you'll be always dealing with intergovernment relations. I nominate Bill. I forgot I can nominate too.
How many do you need?
2. 2. Any more nominations?
George?
George Samper?
No, we abstain.
I abstain.
Oh. You can't abstain too quick.
You did good on board.
Didn't even write your name yet.
I see some good people on there already.
Any more nominations?
Nomination ceased.
Okay. Okay, we need ballots. Oh, so just write down 2 people. Just, each of you write down 2 people who you want on the committee.
the other one.
You guys wanna do a campaign speech?
Everybody to the crop. See, maybe else.
Two names?
Two names.
Oh, they like to get which
Remember, just write two names.
I sent mine to Brian.
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh, we got 3 pens, eh? Give everybody free dinner. Okay.
White
M&M's. That's easy.
You can write it down, or you want me to write another piece of paper? Or Catherine's?
Oh, I wrote it down.
Oh, okay.
Right.
Going down, okay.
Give me a second here. Okay. I'll give her.
When he gets the cakes, Shabbat morning after for a coffee.
On our places, got it, he's the second person on the west. Good. Second one.
Took on Stanley Williams.
The other one's in there.
Okay. Now what? For skin.
Robert or?
For skin. For skin.
Robin.
Robin, yeah.
For skin.
Whiskey.
Stanley Williams' name.
Oh.
Finally took them 2 by 2, was it? Take them off.
I'm trying to.
Yeah.
Gelukkig is hij in. Ja. Oh, my God, you got a Gitxsan pen. How many years you working for it?
I still got my 19th century.
Oh.
Me and Gordy. 19th century.
Then you took yours, you stole mine. You actually
chairperson.
Such a big committee.
I have to inject daily meetings and there's some of the three lights more hard, we can match it.
Two successful, committee members, standing committee is, Larry Schultz and Bill Blackwater.
Next one's who? Next committee.
Move to destroy ballots.
I second.
Move to destroy the ballots. All in favor? Done. Just to repeat again, as Larry Schultz and Bill Blackwater earlier were the committee members. Crisis management update provided by Nisky Manu, Art Wilson, and Brian Williams. Art has a couple of comments before, so a couple of minutes there.
Okay, I'll try to make it quick. I was out of the picture for a little bit there because I was asked to do a job in Wet'suwet'en country by the house group that's leading the pipeline. I don't want to mention names because I have no authority to say nothing about it. But in any case, like the stance that where my art course was happening, they do the same stance as us. Like we own the land and we don't want a pipeline. As far as they're concerned, there will be no pipeline. But I think they are getting good support from the other Wet'suwet'en hereditary chiefs that I've seen when I was there now, but the other beauty of something that a lot of us don't know is there's about 6 or 7 Gitxsan young people there that are with the group, and the hereditary chiefs over there remind us that historically we were always together, and they're really grateful for those young people. Because and I was really quite proud of that when I saw that, yeah, so it's, I think I let Bobby and others finish our report because I was kind of outside of the picture there for a little bit, but I thought that you would especially like to know about our young people that are supporting them. They understand the dangers, but they're there. They're standing up, representing us. So I just thought that you guys might want to know that. And anyway. And I guess the other complications coming up for me, I think, is my job over at Langs teaching,
And I think I'll get the feel of it once I actually see how many students and my bosses, I guess they're I can't whatever my bosses tell me to do, I guess that's what I have to do. Anyway, I took too long here, so.
Thank you, we move on. Gitxsan.
We had a meeting with the media in Paris. Unfortunately, the feds weren't there, Provincial wasn't there, and the sport fishing advisory. None of them showed up, but the media did, and Don Roberts from Gitxsan was there, and a young lady from Gitxsan. I saw that there's 10 in there. That's our old committee. What I liked about that is the media was listening to what our concerns were. So somebody is, and they put it on the newspaper. I don't know about the radios. And it's, I think it's a pretty good understanding of what we're all about. And there are some compliments from other people on what we're trying to do. And you're trying to do because we need more support from other nations. As I heard from the old committee that same time we met, that it sounded like we're begging them to join us, which we're not doing. We're just politely asking people if they could join us. So we'll have more strength in our fight against the government. And that's what's basically, and I don't know if the government, feds, BC government and advisory committee, sport fishing would attend one of our meetings in the future, but we hope so. That way we'll know where they stand and they'll know where we stand. Or Scotty always said we're the government, so we want to be treated as such. That's why I asked that young lady, Elisa, are they really concerned about preserving our fish? Or is it still the almighty dollar to still issue permits and fishing license for sport fishing? That's about all we can say right now. Norman Moore's here and Robin's not here.
So I too was a part of the crisis management team, and this committee reported exactly what happened at the terrace meeting, where none of the other parties showed up. We provided a press release to ensure that the government know that we are sticking to the guns, sticking to our what we have consistently repeated over and over. The permits and licenses that are issued by the government do not allow trespass. But we stuck to that, and we'll continue to say these things. The news release on the same night through CFTK also provided some video and of the Gitxsan at the meeting and in Terrace, and also followed the press release as we had sent out to them. Later on in the, or maybe a week later, I got a phone call from a reporter, Brittany Webster on CFTK. Her comments were around the extended closure to 2020. Asked me a couple of questions. Well, why did the Gitxsan close it for 2020? And is it because of the lack of fish? So there's a bit of a prompt to react to what DFO is saying. All I responded to is we want to work together with the two governments, and since the lack of participation at meetings this year, we have given them another year to come to the table. We want to work hand in hand with the government. And she also asked, is it because the fishing numbers or protection of the land access? My answer is around the access on the Anat, and I explained that that is our fishing site, and that it was what we have, it is what we have had like forever. What are the accents of fishermen on accessing the Anats? I told her I've heard some of them say that they have permits and licenses and can fish anywhere they want. And they have also been very unhappy with not fishing on some of our Anats, and we have told them that the license and permit do not allow trespass. So there's a push to react to what DFO is doing and closing the fishery. And I stuck to the guns. I stuck to these are our Anat, and it's not a law, that it's a standard. This is what we've done like forever. So we continually stay with what we are protecting our Anat, and that is the same message we keep putting out there. We will never change. These are our livelihood as Gitxsan Simgiget and our Gitxsan Wilk members. We will continue to do this and will never change. And we keep prompting the provincial and federal government to come to the table. Every once in a while it seems like they're passing the buck, but we're still here. We're not going to change, we're not going to move. The crisis management team is working really hard and fighting that battle. Many times we're always seem to be prompted to make comments on what the fishery is doing. We stick to our guns. We are protecting our Anats. This is ours and will never change. And licenses, permits do not give them the right to trespass. We also got a response in writing from Ernst Thomas, who represents the Sport Fishery Advisory Board, who is advising DFO. Said that they are not ready to come to meet with the crisis management team. And they also sent a document where they talk about 300,000 fishermen. So our response was to that document that those 300,000 fishermen still do not have access to our Anat. So we're pressing hard for the Gitxsan. We are the Gitxsan, we are the government. I'm not sure if I missed anything, Robert, Art?
Covers it.
Thank you.
Right. They always mention that figure for the last 40 years now, 300,000. Could you, when you respond, could you get him to break it down which area in BC he's talking about? He's not just talking about the Gitxsan 300,000. We can't hold 300,000 in the Gitxsan land.
I just make, I refer to a document that they have, it's their vision for 2010 to 2009 to 2013 that they had passed in 2010, and they reiterate that this group represents 300,000 recreational fishermen from all along the coast, I would imagine. But it's not just here, but we're just saying, well, your 300,000 fishermen still don't have access to our not.
And the next question is, how many foreigners is within that 300,000?
Good question, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Thanks, Brian. Mr. Goodmanu, a very good report. I heard you, Brian, on CFTK last week, and it was well put out. They did put it at 6 o'clock news last week. You know, I think, you know, if you want to look at it, you just go on CFTK and you can hear it, the news when they present it right after you talk to them. So it was well, you know, you captured everything what you just mentioned. So it's out there.
Was that just on radio or did you?
Radio.
It's
TV.
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 I think it's still on there through CFTK Facebook.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So the Bill.
I missed the press release, but I did watch the tape version. But I was just wondering, is the crisis management team happy with comments and or the reporting that was done by the media team that was there to listen to the press release? Are you satisfied with what they put out to the public? And number two is, we all know that provincial ministries and federal departments have advisory teams. And these are not people who are put in place by the people. They're appointed by the minister to be on that advisory team, whether it be federal or provincial. So I would advise the crisis management team to speak to the both political parties, or not parties, but either the department and the ministry, to ask how they, what's their term of reference and how they establish that advisory team for this very important subject of fish or salmon, all salmon. And it's I'll use it right now because it's very important for the jurisdiction, the Gitxsan jurisdiction of the salmon up on our lake. Thank you.
Robert?
It was sort of satisfactory for me, that's my own opinion, because like you said, they are starting to listen to what our concerns are. It could have been more, but it's up to them. It's always up to them to put in what they want. But at least put some of our concerns down on the news wheels. in the newspaper. We're not satisfied with our government's not showing up. And we let I think that's on the news media too, that we were very disappointed that the Fed's provincial and advisory board for sports fishermen didn't show up. So in a way, that's just the start, I think. And hopefully, we're still hoping that we can meet all three. We have to. Like I keep reminding them that none of them ever comes up our way. The big concerts. They always send somebody else. Like our meeting with Doug Donaldson didn't amount to anything. So I don't know what, I didn't think much of that. That's all I can say with that meeting. It didn't amount to anything. But then again, that's my own opinion. To how things went on that meeting. We could have asked more, he could have been more involved, but he wasn't. So we'll just have to keep on pushing. Like Gordy said, we are the government and we want to be treated as such. The same way how they treat us. We're not second-class citizens. If they want our respect, they have to treat us the same way. We are the government itself. The sooner they realize that, the better for us. So like I said, it's somewhat satisfactory for me. But like I pointed out, it's my own opinion with that. At least they're listening. And that's a start. It's going out to the people like non-natives, which never did before. We kept asking the French provincial how they're gonna spread our concerns to other people, like the non-native people, the Abshawa and all that. It never happened. But the media this time started that. Come in.
Oh yeah. Yeah, which like we look to that. The crisis committee should really use what we disclosed to the GWA earlier, because a lot of chiefs said some very important, presented very important concerns, and that's part of our ad. I recommend that the crisis management committee use what we disclosed earlier. Not only that, but the new standing committee also used what we presented individually as from August today. It's very, very challenging, and that's really showing, letting them know what actually they did, the damages they've inflicted, from past years. And it's gotta be, the media's gotta know that, they've damaged it, and a lot of our concerns derive from the salmon disappearing because of those damages. So it's going to be out in the meeting. What we discussed today, all of us, and there were all good comments from each of others. Great.
Thank you.
Half a minute response.
Crisis management. No certainly could so that the frontline workers didn't to net sealed so it is on to and downside addicts who will it is makes it so it doesn't penetrate us. It's for a reason, a nam clisails toasters to place. When as soon as you were born, that work was already there for you. Kwan kat nisu. Hakti nisuin ka on likho esum gigefen. Kulsiyo bukti. Kulay mandala kaki lit and kapit.
Thank you. Robert?
Just to add on what the way is, we did mention all that way, but like I stated a little while ago, it's the newspaper only put down what they want. So we're still paying the radio station in Terrace, like I say in all our financial statements. Maybe we could put that down and let them talk about it. All our concerns regarding what the newspaper, other media don't want to talk about, just like the way they said. Because I know we're paying them good money.
40,000.
Because it's always on the financial statement, so it's about time that we start using them. That way the word will go out to the non-natives and the sport fishing and all that. Come in.
It's a little over half a minute. The recommendation, I just want to also add on to the question of satisfaction or non-satisfaction. I have to agree with what Robert responded to earlier, that add on that it's a small step. It's a small step into enforcing what we believe as the Gitxsan people. We are the Simgiyet. We are responsible for our members, our will. And that, I sound like a broken record, but that'll never change. That'll never ever change. As the Guyas before me and the Guyas before, they've always kept that role. And we as Simgiyet will continue to push that ahead. Thanks for the comments and questions, everyone. Next meeting is, next meeting is September 24th. Mark it in your calendars. September 24th, 4 p.m. Gitxsan is meeting 23rd. We're meeting on the 24th, 4 p.m.
What day is it?
Tuesday.
24th.
Tuesday.
And
Is that based on your availability?
Precise.
Oh,
Precisely, eh?
You don't lend your mind.
So, Roy, you have the last comment on the boundaries that you mentioned earlier?
Yes. The reason why I brought that up, because it was on CFTK TV, where the coastal nations, Port Simpson, Simsan, Gitxsan, and they all moved, and they're all moving right up to saying their power runs up to Terrace. And when I used to talk to Stanley Percy and the Simgiyet New Gets, they always pointed out that Gitxsan power runs all the way down the Skeena River, all the way down lower Kennedy Island, across to Point Island, Island Point they call it, and to the airport And you see where that super port is. There used to be Gitxsan people had a village there a long time ago. 100 to 200 of them lived there. Right on this side of Prince Rupert, as you go into. And that's where the boundary is. And now they're pushing those out and then coming all the way to Terrace. And they're using the Nescas for it. See what they're doing? They're using the Nescas for that coming up to Terrace. And I talked to a couple of elders in Nesca, and they said, no, he said, that is you guys' your own boundary. I've heard you mention it before. He said, that's your guys' boundary. That's Gitxsan. Why do I to fresh water? Is how far the tide goes out? Fresh water. If lo I gypsum there is wish upon that. There is spawn embedded liquid there. So give the Robert a heads up about it, and they would maybe set up a meeting with them and discuss how come they moved up to Skeena. We don't see us going down to Nesca and going up to Nass or outside Dundas there. No, we don't see us going claiming that. Hey. So it's a concern where eventually, and you wonder why the government is not listening to us. And you appreciate how much money these guys are getting down the coast. The government is pouring money down there. Pouring a lot of money. They do it to the Haida Gwaii, they do it to Port Simpson, they do it to Bella Bella. They got millions and millions of dollars. And here we only get just enough money to run our office here. And here these guys are getting millions. And they're developing, you call it, sportsman's lodges along the coast. The guys go outside Dundas now and Stevens Island. There are sportsman's lodges there. And this government coming buying those for those guys. And that's why they're doing it. And it's hard to hear when these people do it, when you hear your elders that passed on saying it, stating it. And there was a signing at the All Native in Rupert way back in the 60s. All the nations here, as far as the Wet'suwet'en, signed a declaration how far our boundaries are. I tried getting it out of Jeffries, one of George Jeffries' daughters from Port Simpson, and she said she couldn't find it anywhere. She looked and looked and couldn't find it, that declaration. And the latest one was signed by Pete Muldoe, Norman Moore, Ralph Michelle. This was in the mid-70s again. And that she couldn't find neither. There's two of them that's out there. And we need to do something about it, because if we don't, they're going to say, oh, you guys, it's up to Terrace now. There's no power down there. They can do what they want. Go to say.
Thank you, Roy. Any other comments? Any comments, Catherine?
Just that it's interesting to watch you guys on the Facebook here. Live. There is a bit of a time lapse.
Thank you, Catherine. Då är som det som sen vi get Sige manak Wilsbert. Amplanar Jepson. Talk to them. How many sama amagets stutum lahat skadesa do.
Well, she means from the Tamara table. Injection more volume. Meaning that's not lawyers. The board that's not heavy. Lawyers meaning. Scoring the shares that teaching them set on. Lawyers mean. Want to know, do skis with horse. Kabilas win. Die connectors niet meer. De broodje achtergrond. Echt, zie ik het kit. En zie waar een erotisch en de achtergrond. Zoals het gedekt is nou. Neem die wind. Als je het kit goed nog mee. Je zegt hem de gegeven. Ik zou je ook zien waar. Je maakt mee. Je moet een broodje niet eens kijken. Nee, die wordt met zijn teamvoet. Hier de steeds bij de lunestijd. En ja, dat is schepels van mij niet bij de maatstijd. Toen ze goed net in de maat van Jesus Christ niet meer.
Amen. Kom ja, Rena. Rena. Kom je aan daar? Nee, deel hem aan.
See you, Kath.